There's fame from crime, and then there's fame gone criminal. These titans let elite status go to their heads, and in some cases, they let drugs blur their minds. Here's how they lost everything, including their lives, behind bars. In the 1960s, record producer Phil Spector was an icon, working with just about every famous band of the time. Unlike producers of the past, Spector was seen as an auteur, bringing a unique approach dubbed the Wall of Sound to dozens of records that became hits. But on February 3, 2003, Spector met actor and nightclub hostess Lana Clarkson. He invited her back to his house, but the night ended with Clarkson dead in Spector's home. According to testimony by Spector's chauffeur, he heard a pop and then saw Spector emerge with a revolver in his hand, uttering the words, "I think I killed somebody."
A tragedy happened, but it could have happened in anybody's house.
Spector's first trial ended in 2007 with a hung jury, but a second trial that ended in 2009 resulted in Spector's conviction and imprisonment. After more than a decade of incarceration, Spector died on January 16, 2021, due to complications from COVID-19. While Jeffrey Epstein is now far more famous for his crimes than he ever was before, he was a huge-name investor for many years. Epstein was so successful in the financial world, flipping small fortunes into massive ones, that he handled the assets of celebrities, politicians, and more. Epstein frequently held massive parties, with invites only for the biggest names in the world. It was later discovered that these parties might have had sinister things going on behind the scenes, but at the time, he was simply seen as a very powerful socialite. In 2005, after being accused of molestation by a 14-year-old girl, Epstein went to prison for 18 months. He was also registered as a sex offender, but was otherwise given a lenient sentence. In July 2019, however, he was arrested once again, accused of running a massive child trafficking network.
What was the crime of which you were convicted?
Two counts, one soliciting prostitution and procuring a minor for prostitution.
On August 10, 2019, Epstein was found dead in his jail cell, having allegedly taken his own life. Numerous ongoing rumors claim that Epstein was actually murdered. If you owned a PC in the 90s or early 2000s, you probably recall internet security tools from the McAfee company. It was founded by John McAfee, an outspoken tech voice known as much for his social media presence and political campaigns as the software he created.
Oh, hello there. I'm John McAfee, founder of the McAfee Antivirus Company.
Near the end of his life, John McAfee was no longer associated with the McAfee Company, which was purchased by Intel in 2011. In October 2020, McAfee was arrested by Spanish authorities attempting to fly out of an airport in Barcelona. He had previously been charged with tax evasion in the United States, which intended to extradite him from Spain, according to CNN. In June 2021, the Spanish National Court approved McAfee's extradition, but on June 23, 2021, McAfee took his own life at the age of 75 in his cell in Spain. Nearly 2 years prior to his death, McAfee claimed that the US government intended to do him harm. He publicly alleged that he was not suicidal and that if he died in such a manner, it would be a murder. In 2010, Aaron Hernandez was just beginning a great football career. Playing for 3 seasons, Hernandez made it to the Super Bowl in 2012.
Is this going to be the year?
I hope so.
But during the 2013 off-season, Hernandez was arrested for the murder of Odin Lloyd, his fiancée's sister's boyfriend and a semi-pro football player, according to Sporting News. On June 17, 2013, Lloyd was murdered not far from Hernandez's house. Hernandez initially denied being involved in the crime, but it soon became clear that was not the case. On April 15, 2015, Hernandez was convicted of the murder and sent to prison for life. But nearly 2 years later to the day, he was found dead in his cell, where it appeared he had taken his own life. When Hernandez died, he had not yet exhausted all of his appeals, so his conviction was briefly vacated, though it was later restored after an appeal by Lloyd's family. Celebrity publicist Max Clifford might not be a household name in the States, but he was well known in his native Britain, where he worked as a celebrity publicist for decades for folks like Simon Cowell. He was also notorious for representing a variety of figures peddling so-called kiss-and-tell stories. These people alleged that they had secret relationships with other famous people, and Clifford would take the stories to the British tabloids, according to The Guardian.
Well, as long as they said how wonderful I was in bed, I wouldn't mind too much.
But Clifford also had a history of accusations of sexual abuse. Numerous women, some who were underage at the time of the incidents, came forward in the 2010s to accuse Clifford of various offenses. While Clifford denied these stories, in 2014, he was convicted of indecent assault and sentenced to 8 years in prison. In 2017, while cleaning his cell, Clifford collapsed from a heart attack and died shortly thereafter. Lou Pearlman was a record producer and manager with a knack for forming boy bands in the late 90s. He created the Backstreet Boys and followed this up by introducing the world to bands like NSYNC, O-Town, and LFO, all of whom he produced and managed, according to Billboard.
I think I can do that. I think I can put a group like that together.
But while Pearlman had a talent for developing pop groups, he was even better at his other job, ripping people off. Nearly every band that worked with Pearlman later sued him for fraud. All that time, Pearlman was secretly running one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history, scamming investors out of $500 million, something that landed him in prison in 2008, where he was sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy and money laundering. In 2010, Pearlman suffered a stroke in prison, but survived. 6 years later, he was scheduled for heart surgery, but suffered a cardiac arrest before the surgery was performed. He died on August 19, 2016. Speaking of Ponzi schemes, the biggest was run by Bernie Madoff, a celebrity investor who was chairman of the NASDAQ exchange for years. While Madoff seemed like a legitimate businessman on the surface and a bit of a legend, behind the scenes, he was running a pyramid scheme the likes of which the world hadn't seen since ancient Egypt. It was built 100% on fraud without a single investment made, and it's a wonder he got away with it for as long as he did. It took his sons ratting him out to the government for him to finally get caught. Madoff was convicted and sentenced to 150 years in prison in 2009 after pleading guilty to multiple types of fraud.
The whole concept of these new types of systems is to make it easier and more cost-effective for people to trade.
Madoff was already at an advanced age when he was sentenced, and he lasted just over a decade in jail. In April 2021, Madoff died of natural causes at the age of 82 while still serving his sentence. Fast Eddie Johnson was one of the best basketball players of the 70s and 80s, spending a decade on the court from 1977 to 1987, primarily with the Atlanta Hawks. He even made it as an NBA All-Star twice in 1980 and 1981. He earned his nickname Fast Eddie by, well, being fast. Off the court, though, Johnson suffered from drug addiction. As his drug abuse got worse, Johnson fell out of the NBA and began playing for smaller associations. He attempted a comeback in the late 80s, but was suspended by the NBA due to his heavy cocaine use. Johnson had already had several brushes with the law regarding drugs and other minor crimes, but things quickly spiraled out of control after his pro career ended, with Johnson being arrested for crimes from burglary to assaulting a police officer. Johnson was in and out of prison until 2008, when he was convicted of assaulting an 8-year-old girl, which finally landed him behind bars with a life sentence and no possibility of parole. In 2020, Johnson died of an undisclosed illness while still serving time in Milton, Florida. In 1800s New York, no one in the Democratic Party could get elected without the blessing of Tammany Hall, a political machine that played kingmaker in New York political circles. Between the 1850s and 70s, the organization was led by William M. Tweed, better known as Boss. Boss Tweed was a politician, serving as a congressman for New York in the 1850s and a New York state senator. Getting on his good side was an important step for any members of the Democratic Party at the time.
Welcome to America, son. Your long, arduous journey is over. Go back to your own country. Boot Tammany!
But Tweed began to embezzle an outrageous sum of money, estimated to be around $30 million and possibly as much as $200 million when adjusted for inflation, according to biography. Tweed was finally caught in 1871. Still, even after his arrest, he got re-elected to the New York State Senate. He was able to post bail for his first few arrests, but eventually ran out of cash and had to stay locked up. In 1875, he managed to escape and fled to Spain. He was returned to the United States in 1876. Back in prison, he died of pneumonia in 1878. Back in 1997, just before the WWF changed to the WWE, a little-known wrestler by the name of Too Sexy, Brian Christopher, hit the scene. He was briefly the WWF Tag Team Champion with his partner, Scotty 2 Hotty, according to the Daily Beast.
He was on top of his game that made him to WWE. He made it to WrestleMania.
Little did viewers at home know, Brian Christopher was actually Brian Christopher Lawler, son of wrestling legend Jerry the King Lawler. While he never reached the heights of his dad's work in the ring, he did okay. At least until 2001, when he was caught smuggling drugs from Canada into the United States, which led to his release from the then WWF. Christopher was also arrested for disorderly conduct and another time for public intoxication, but he was later arrested in his hometown of Memphis, Tennessee for a DUI in 2018 with an included charge of evading police. On July 7, 2018, Christopher landed behind bars, and on July 29th, he was found hanging in his cell after an altercation with another inmate. He was 46 years old. Lawrence Phillips had a successful college football career at the University of Nebraska before being drafted by the then St. Louis Rams with a 6th overall pick in 1996. But even before joining the NFL, Phillips had legal troubles. The worst of these involved him breaking into a teammate's apartment to violently assault a woman who was Phillips' ex-girlfriend, according to Bleacher Report. Amazingly, Nebraska didn't kick him off the team, deciding to suspend him for 6 games instead. Trouble followed him into his professional career too, as he was released by the Rams mid-season in 1997.
Bartenders would come over, hey man, good luck this Sunday, and your boy Lawrence was here till 4 a.m.
Phillips attempted a comeback with the 49ers in '99, but didn't last long. After playing with smaller leagues for a few years, Phillips was arrested after hitting 3 teenagers with his car during a dispute, according to the New York Times. While in prison, he was also charged with even more domestic violence charges, which led to him serving a 31-year sentence. During that time, he murdered his cellmate, Damian Soward. While awaiting trial for this crime, Phillips took his own life in his cell. In blues circles, Roy Buchanan was a bit of a legend. Working as a sideman in various bands in the late 1950s, Buchanan launched a solo career in the 60s. He had 2 albums go gold during the 70s, 1973's second album and 1977's Loading Zone. He's also rumored to have turned down a job playing for the Rolling Stones. But behind the scenes, Buchanan had developed a nasty drinking habit, abusing drugs as well. While Buchanan tried to clean up in the 80s, he relapsed on August 14, 1988, when he was arrested for public intoxication. A few hours later, during a routine check, Buchanan was found dead, having hung himself with his own shirt. If you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts, please dial or text 988 to speak with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can also seek help by visiting 988lifeline.org.